Well, good evening. Meteorologist Evan Stewart here in the 13 News Now Digital Weather Center, and we're going to do a deeper dive here into Hurricane Milton, which again, a massively strong hurricane that is moving through the Gulf of Mexico, rapidly intensifying, one of the fastest developing systems that we've seen in quite some time. And as far as the wind speeds go, tied with one of the strongest hurricanes ever in the Gulf of Mexico. So I'll go ahead and switch over to the weather graphics and show you what we have going on with this system. And again, here's the United States. Here is the Gulf of Mexico. And again, even on this wide view, you can see that well-formed eye that developed earlier this morning with Hurricane Milton and continues, this storm continues to strengthen as it works its way here just towards the northwest of the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. I'll sort of outline that right in there. That is the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. So already the Yucatan Peninsula is starting to get brushed with some of the outer bands of this hurricane. And I'll show you the visible satellite. Of course, it gets a little bit darker as the sun sets. The visible satellite is literally the satellite taking a picture of this hurricane. And we get a picture now with some of this new high resolution imagery every minute. So this is a massively strong hurricane, very well formed, very well developed. So we zoom in, give you a closer look here. You can just see that well formed eye getting that sort of stadium effect. Perfectly symmetrical. This is a classic example of a monster hurricane, a major hurricane now. Winds of over 180 miles per hour, gusts of 220. So this is a very large and very dangerous hurricane. Now, of course, the strongest part of the hurricane is always in the eye wall. That is that wall of clouds that surround the clear center. And even here in some of these earlier images, you can almost see all the way down from the satellite right through the center of the hurricane, all the way down to the ocean surface. And if you've ever been through an eye of a hurricane, it gets clear, the winds stop, the rain stop, because it is perfectly clear all the way from the base of the hurricane to the top of the hurricane. And again, this is a very strong hurricane, one of the strongest that we've seen in the Gulf of Mexico in quite some time. Hurricane Hunter aircraft have been out flying through the storm, and this is the latest Hurricane Hunter. And right now what they're doing, the one earlier was flying through the center of the storm. I'll put on that track here in a moment. This Hurricane Hunter is surveying the atmosphere around it by getting the idea of what the atmosphere is like around the storm. As you feed that data into the hurricane models, it gives us a better indication of how fast this storm is going to strengthen, and it's been rapidly intensifying all day, and lets us know, is there dry air on one side of it? We can use satellite and we can use other technology, but the Hurricane Hunter aircraft do an amazing job going out there and tracking this storm. And let's see, there's another mission that is out there. There's the latest coming in. I'll sort of move this over a little bit so you can see just getting ready to come in. So another Hurricane Hunter aircraft is going to be flying into it. And this is the one that is actually going to do the crisscross pattern. I'll go to a previous one a little bit earlier. And this was this afternoon around 2 and 3 o'clock. Let me back this up so we can get a 6-hour loop in there. Satellite data might disappear there for a minute. Well, there you go. You can see the Hurricane Hunter aircraft that was out there a little bit earlier that was going through the center. They do that crisscross pattern, and you can see that around 1 o'clock, they had an estimated surface wind speed of 204 miles per hour and a pressure of 914. The lower the pressure, the stronger the hurricane is. And again, this is one of the strongest hurricanes we've seen in the Gulf of Mexico. So that was the mission a little bit earlier, around 1, 2 o'clock this afternoon. We have the one that is out there now that is sort of going around the center of the storm. There's the older mission there as it was leaving. We have the one that is going around to show us what the atmosphere is like around it. And now we have that brand new mission that is just getting ready to come in here north of the Yucatan Peninsula. We'll show it to you here at the last couple of frames. There you can see it in the top right-hand corner of your screen. So that mission is going to be another one that comes in. They'll go through, do that crisscross pattern, and that'll give us the information for likely the 8 o'clock advisory for what is happening here with Milton. So here's the 5 o'clock advisory. Just came out about 30 minutes ago. Again, Milton is a Category 5 hurricane, winds of 180 miles per hour and gusts to 220. Right now it's still moving ever so slowly to the east at 10 miles per hour, and it's just 80 miles northwest-northwest of Progreso, Mexico, and 675 miles southwest of Tampa, Florida. You can see that information is right up here. So if it stayed at 10 miles per hour and it's 675 miles away, you would think, well, that's 67.5 hours until it makes landfall, and it'll be probably here getting close to the Florida coastline. Certainly that eye by late Wednesday. It might be late Wednesday, early Thursday morning when the storm actually makes landfall. But here's the Hurricane Center forecast track. Again, carries this storm there just north of the Yucatan Peninsula, Mexico. And then late Wednesday, early Thursday, coming ashore here in Florida. Again, this is the latest forecast track. I'll be able to zoom in here and you can see just inland around 2 a.m. on Thursday morning as a Category 3 hurricane. So that would bring that landfall probably around 10, 11 o'clock, midnight or so. And keep in mind that the cone that we show here, this cone is where the possible center of the track could be. So this could still move up towards the north, towards Cedar Key, or farther south towards Fort Myers. Right now, you don't necessarily want to focus on the exact center, but that center line does give you some ideas as to where the worst part of the storm is. So if that center line were to sort of follow that, that would mean the strongest winds, the dirty side of the storm, would be right here, right over Tampa. And you'll notice that there is Tampa Bay right in there, and you have St. Petersburg over there. So on this sort of flow, or on this sort of motion, on the south side of the storm, that would bring all of this wind coming up here just like that. And let me do that line again. So that would bring those strong winds right up Tampa Bay and create some very substantial flooding on the eastern side of that track. So again, you don't always necessarily want to focus on exactly where that center is, but that center line is really the delineation between the dirty side of the storm and what is somewhat a weaker side of the storm. And notice, even by Thursday afternoon, still a Category 1 storm here off the coast of Florida. So even areas from Cape Canaveral up towards Daytona Beach, and likely even up towards Jacksonville, are going to run into some issues with this storm, even as it's exiting off the coast of Florida. And certainly there on the, once you get on the east side of Florida, Daytona Beach, you're going to be on this side of the storm. So those winds are going to be coming in this way and moving offshore here. So they could still have some significant issues and some tidal surge and some flooding on the east side of Florida. And then from there, the storm quickly moves off towards the east. And by Saturday, it's out towards the island of Bermuda as a remnant area of low pressure. So we'll switch over towards the spaghetti plots. Now, just a reminder of what these spaghetti plots are. We have a lot of different computer models that we use to make these hurricane forecasts. And what we're going to do is we're going to plot each of those different computer models on this graphic, and they give us different things. And all of these models have different formulas. Some are older, some are newer, some are intensity forecasts, some are track forecasts. But by using these models, it gives us a little bit of a better idea of where the storm will go. And you can see all the different ones: the SHIP model, the UK Met model, the GEM, the Canadian, the HMON. And you can see there is a little bit of a difference. The UK is a little bit farther to the south here, certainly getting south of Naples. But there is a fairly good consensus here, still 50, 60, 100 miles difference, but bringing the storm here. This is Wednesday at 5:30. You're just off the coast of Florida, somewhere close to Tampa, and then carrying it off again towards the northeast. So there is a little bit of some difference here in where exactly these hurricane models sort of bring the storm. A couple still down towards Fort Myers, some a little bit farther to the north towards Cedar Key. But as we get closer, you can see they all are really starting to sort of target in here towards Tampa, a little bit north or a little bit south. Tampa certainly in the eye of this storm. So let's go over the advisories that are out there right now here in the pink color. So that's areas from Fort Myers up towards Orlando and Gainesville, including Tampa, St. Petersburg, all under a hurricane warning now. That means that hurricane conditions are expected within 48 hours. Of course, right here across wherever the center goes, that's where we're going to see the worst of the storm, the strongest of the winds. But still, since this is already a massive hurricane, that is a Category 5 and continues to strengthen. Probably can't strengthen too much more since we've only had a couple of hurricanes get over 180 miles per hour inside the Gulf of Mexico. You know, we might see this tick up a little bit more. It's very difficult for these strong, massive hurricanes to maintain, but certainly, you know, even up towards Gainesville and Fort Myers, Orlando can see hurricane conditions. And then here in the red area, and this is the east coast of Florida, hurricane watch. That'll probably be upgraded to a hurricane warning because, as we saw from the forecast track, it keeps it as a hurricane as it exits off the Florida peninsula. Here in the orange areas, we have tropical storm warnings. So those are areas, again, that we will expect tropical storm force conditions. So those are winds that could gust close to 75 miles per hour, and that takes us all the way down towards southern Florida. It doesn't quite include the Keys, but even up towards the Big Bend area, over towards Apalachicola, getting close to there, and Panama City Beach. Tallahassee, not under any kind of advisories, but just east of there, under tropical storm watches, and that even goes up towards areas of southern Georgia, areas that were certainly hard hit with Helene. So again, there are pretty much the entire state of Florida, with the exception of the Panhandle, under some sort of watch or warning when it comes to this system. And again, this is going to move quickly across the Florida peninsula, but it is going to cause some very significant issues, especially we're thinking from Tampa down towards Fort Myers. As far as the storm surge warnings, right now they extend along the Big Bend all the way down here to just north of Tampa and all of Tampa. And here in a moment, we'll take a look at some of the flooding potential. This is the official National Hurricane Center forecast for the potential for storm surge. And here you can see in this pink area from just north of Fort Myers all the way up towards Tampa, we are seeing right in there the area potentially up over 12 feet of storm surge. And around Fort Myers, here in the red, looking at up to 12 feet, so that's your 9 to 12, and from Tampa northward, looking at 9 to 12. Big Bend could still see up to 3 feet, same thing for the Keys. And then you'll notice here on the east side of Florida, up to 6-foot storm surge, and you're talking about areas certainly north of Miami and Fort Lauderdale, but as you're getting up towards Port St. Lucie, here around Cape Canaveral, Cocoa Beach, points northward up towards Jacksonville and even into southern Georgia as the storm exits. And again, we talked about how those winds here on the, on the north side of that track, let me get this here, will be coming in this way, and down here they'll be blowing offshore. So that's why we don't have the advisories for that part of Florida. But here, once it exits off the coastline, we will see that potential for up to 6 feet of storm surge on the northeastern coast of Florida and possibly even into areas of Georgia. So let's zoom in. This is a computer model forecast showing areas of potential flooding. So we've zoomed in here towards the Tampa Bay area. Here's 275. Of course, they're doing a lot of construction there, working on some of those spans, taking you from Tampa down towards St. Petersburg. And everywhere you can see this red color, that is where we're looking at greater than 9 feet. So that includes a lot of these areas here on the western side of the bay, the eastern side here of the peninsula as you go down towards St. Petersburg. And a lot of that is because it really does depend on the exact track of the storm, but you can just see all that water will be pushed up here into Tampa Bay and up into all these sounds and all these inlets. And that's why the potential is there for some significant flooding that could even be higher than what we had with Helene, and that was some record flooding in parts of Tampa Bay. So I'll clear all those off. And let's zoom in a little bit more here as we get into that Tampa Bay area. As you get down towards the downtown, again, you can see those issues with flooding coming in here towards the south side of the town, then over here towards East Tampa, seeing some issues. And right through here, this area, you can see it right in there. That is actually the runway for the Tampa airport. So this could cause some significant issues with flooding at the airport as well. And then as we go across the bay, over here you can see on the east side of the peninsula, working away on the east side of 275, all the way down towards St. Petersburg, Gulfport, South Pasadena, South Pete Beach, Sunshine Beach, down towards Tierra Verde, and point southward, you can see all of those areas. They're likely going to experience some significant flooding. Let's head a little bit farther south now, down the Florida Peninsula, as we take you here a little bit closer to Fort Myers and Cape Coral, Pine Island Center, Punta Gorda, Port Charlotte. You can see there also running into some of those same issues. The gray areas, mostly wetlands, mostly marshlands. That's why they're shaded in sort of there in the gray. So we already know those areas are going to flood. But here near Fort Myers, you run into that same sort of an issue with those winds blowing up these bays and up these inlets towards Port Charlotte, causing some issues with some flooding. So once again, that could be a very significant issue and some very significant storm surge coming in here just towards the west of 75, taking you down from Fort Myers and down towards Charlotte, Marco Island, Everglades. We start to see it lessen a little bit. We're not seeing as much of the reds because it'll be farther from the center, at least as far as the forecast track that is designated by the National Hurricane Center. Now we're going to switch over to when those tropical storm force winds, so these are winds that are only 40 miles per hour, 45, will start to come on shore, and already by Wednesday morning, just starting to approach the Florida coastline, and by Wednesday evening, already here through central Florida. So this is why residents of Florida have to already, they're already having evacuations for some of these areas because there's not a lot of time. Already there's an area of low pressure that is creating issues, creating rain. So folks preparing along the Florida coastline are already dealing with rain and squally weather, not even associated here with our Hurricane Milton, and that's just going to increase here as we go over the next few days. Again, you can see here through the Yucatan Peninsula already experiencing those tropical storm force winds, and they'll likely experience that here across the west coast of Cuba as well, and even getting close to Mobile, Alabama. So these are some of those areas, again, starting Wednesday morning into Wednesday evening, and then as the storm exits, still looking at tropical storm force winds and likely some hurricane gusts on the east side of Florida. So here's a little bit of a different view. This is one of our in-house computer models, and the blues in there are our tropical storm force winds, category 1 here in the green, category 2 in the yellow, and you can see the cone here that the National Hurricane Center has put out. So here it takes us through Tuesday into Wednesday evening, Thursday morning. Our in-house computer model, a tad bit slower than the official National Hurricane Center forecast, but not by much. You can see this takes us into 2 a.m. with that eye approaching the Tampa Bay area. Again, if it's a little bit farther to the south, which is certainly a possibility. Remember, the hurricane cone here that we're seeing, that's where the potential eye could go. So it could still be as far north as Cedar Key or as far south as Fort Myers. This is the most likely scenario, but again, there could be jogs as we go here through the next few days. Even as the storm approaches, there could be a quick jog towards the north and towards the south. But you can see category 3 hurricane wind gust forecast here, even into Tampa Bay, and certainly on the west side as the storm comes on shore, and then it works its way there towards the east off the Florida coastline. So let's back that up a little bit more. And what you'll be able to see, let's run through that one more time, as the storm is here coming on shore, working its way right towards the coastline late Wednesday into Thursday morning. We could see even those tropical storm force winds in Orlando even by early Thursday morning, and likely tropical storm or hurricane gusts as we head into late Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon as the storm exits off the coastline. And still here you can see where we have that 6-foot storm surge potential here up around Daytona Beach. This computer still saying could have category 2 wind gusts here on the north end of Florida, north here of Cape Canaveral. Here's another view. This is a different computer model that is going to show us some of the hurricane force winds. Tropical storm here in the red, hurricane in the pink, and here in the white, these are major hurricanes. So these are the category 3 winds here, and even Wednesday afternoon. This is starting here just 24 hours from now, 5:30. Already this model is forecasting wind gusts of 50 miles per hour in St. Petersburg, 40 in Naples, 44 in Key West. And as the storm works its way on shore, you can see there in St. Petersburg the potential for wind gusts over 90 miles per hour. This computer model is saying 91. Again, some of the The core of some of those major hurricane winds might try to stay offshore, but as we saw, could try to creep in here towards parts of the Tampa Bay area. Orlando, Thursday morning, wind gusts of 39 miles per hour, even here on the east coast of Florida, Fort Pierce, 36. You can see Orlando could experience wind gusts close to hurricane strength. There were some 70-mile-per-hour gusts in there, even with this bottle. I'll back that up just a little bit so you can see there. Around 12:30, midday on Thursday, could have wind gusts of 70 miles per hour there towards Orlando. Fort Pierce seeing those wind gusts over 50. And it's not really until late Thursday that the storm starts to move offshore. So again, this is going to be a sort of a quick mover. It's going to move off the coastline pretty quickly, but those effects will continue to linger across Florida even into Thursday afternoon. So let's talk a little bit about the history here, because this has been an incredible hurricane that just Thursday was absolutely nothing. It was not even a tropical depression. It developed into a tropical depression on Thursday. Through Friday and into Saturday, we crossed over into tropical storm situation. That's when it got its name. That's when it's got the name Milton. And you can see quickly from Saturday to Sunday to today how quickly this storm strengthened right through here. And it has been rapidly developing from a Category 1 hurricane yesterday, Category 2, all the way up towards a Category 5. And we'll talk about that intensification here in a moment. And the pressure has been going down. Remember, I talked about how the stronger a hurricane is, the lower the pressure. And as of the 5 o'clock advisory, 905 millibars. So this continues to strengthen. It is a Category 5 storm. And that 905 millibars is significant because that now makes it the 5th most intense hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico in the satellite era. So that goes back to the 50s. And you can see Rita holds the record for the strongest hurricane here in the Gulf of Mexico in 2005. It had 180 mile per hour winds, just like Milton, but it had a central pressure of 895 millibars. Allen, 899. Camille, which is one that also created significant issues for Florida, for Virginia as well, into the Florida mountains. That storm caused massive flooding, similar to what Helene has done in North Carolina. It did it in Virginia as well, and the town of Buena Vista really got hit hard with that storm in 1969. So that was 900 millibars. Katrina, 902, and Milton is just behind Hurricane Katrina. You can see, of course, 2005, one of the most devastating hurricane seasons on record, and now with Helene and Milton hitting Florida, it's another season that looks to be very devastating for the state of Florida and other areas, certainly Georgia and North Carolina, seeing some of the devastating effects as well. And then as we take a look at the quickest strengthening from Category 1 to Category 5, Milton is now tied for number 2 with Maria for 18 hours. Wilma in 2005, again, there's that 2005 season once again. It took only 12 hours to go from a Category 1 to a Category 5. It's taken Milton 18 hours. And now we are almost through the second column of the hurricane list. If another system were to develop, and there are a couple of areas that we're watching right now, low odd chances, that next one would be Nadine. But as you can see here, this is our second Category 5 hurricane. Of course, we had Beryl earlier in the season, and then we got up to Debbie and Ernesto, and things really started to slow down. For almost a month, we didn't have any kind of tropical development. Then we had Gordon and Helene, and then out in the Atlantic, you might have even missed Isaac and Joyce. Kirk was a major hurricane. Leslie is still out there. It is a Category 1. It's not going to affect land. And of course, we get into Hurricane Milton. So we'll give you one final look here at the satellite loop and what's going on with the storm. Again, spinning here off the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. Let me just go back a little bit here. And again, you can see I mentioned some of the squally rain that folks across Florida are already dealing with. There's a weak area of low pressure that's just off the coastline that's creating some of that squally weather, especially down through southern Florida. But even Tampa seeing some of those showers with those winds coming on shore. So already seeing some rain, not from, of course, Milton, but seeing some of that rain across Florida. And there's that loop once again, the visible loop. As we get here closer to sunset, we start to see some of those shadows and just some of those massive thunderstorms that are firing up here around the center of the storm. Widen it back out. Let's see if the latest hurricane hunter, how much closer. I'll switch over to the newest recon here. And again, so they're not quite to it. It's going to be another couple of hours before they get a little bit closer. And you can see they have also switched out a little bit in here, taking off that western edge of the satellite and expanding it eastward, because this is the high resolution that we get every minute. So still a little ways to go before that next hurricane hunter gets in it, but here another hour and a half, likely going to be starting to penetrate that eye wall with that first cycle, and then they'll do their crisscross pattern with the storm. One final check here of that hurricane forecast track. You'll notice here that it does start to weaken as it gets close to Florida. That is the official forecast as of now, that it will start to weaken from a category 5 to a 4 to a 3. So why is that? The main thing that we're watching is as we get here into Wednesday, there's going to be some increased wind shear here in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. At least that's what the forecast is. It's also very difficult for these storms to maintain category 5 strength for any length of time. You have things called eye wall replacement cycles where they'll briefly weaken and sort of refire back up. As it's going here over the Gulf of Mexico, the waters there are significantly warm, certainly as you get in that loop current for the Gulf Stream here that eventually comes around the southern Florida and then up our coastline. So it is going to be encountering that. The water starts to get a little shallower here, especially you have the continental plate that is there. The water off the coast of Florida is very, very shallow, which also is one of the reasons why the storm surge can be so significant. But that would allow the hurricane to churn up that water, likely a little bit of a minimal impact, but it could impact some of the dissipation of the storm as it gets a little bit closer. But the wind shear is the main thing. Wind shear tends to tear hurricanes apart. You know, a nice hurricane here, let's give you this sort of example here with the wind shear. So in a nice, perfectly formed hurricane, it's nice vertically stacked. But as you get into a higher wind shear, it starts to push the top of the hurricane and it's not able to vent quite as easily. So that's why as it starts to encounter some of that wind shear, we start to see a little bit of that weakening. Again, that's what we're banking on in the forecast. There's certainly the potential that that could not happen, that may not happen. Again, it's not going to hold on to the 180 mile per hour winds for 2 days. That's just not meteorologically possible. It will go through some fluctuations here as we get closer. And again, that wind shear will likely weaken it. But even if it's a category 3, that's still a major hurricane, winds of 125 miles per hour around the center. And it is a category 5 now and will likely be through Wednesday morning. So it'll still be pushing that much water. Just because the winds weaken, it is still going to have that high storm surge, and it is going to push those waves up along the Florida coastline. So I do have a wave model in here. Let me pull that up and sort of take you through that and show you this wave model forecast. You can see it coming in there towards the Florida coastline. Right back up here a little bit. Zoomed in a little bit too close. And take that off. And put on some labels there. And you can see some of those winds that'll be coming on shore here, coming up towards Tampa Bay, some of those waves. When you start to get into those reds, you're looking at 30 and 40-foot waves. That potential is there with this storm as it comes on shore. Again, we start to get into some of those shallow waters with the storm as well. There you can see that wave forecast as it comes ashore. And then as it exits, you can see that wave forecast coming in on Thursday on the east side of Florida. So again, so many things go into these tropical systems. You have the wind, you have the waves, you have the storm surge, the flooding, you have the flooding from the heavy rains. And as we always say, you can hide from the wind, but you can't run from the water. Once that water comes ashore, there's nothing that you can do. So that's why they have the evacuations that are out for Florida now because the water, the flooding, that is the most dangerous part of any hurricane. The wind gets a lot of mention, but certainly with any hurricane, it is the water that is the most dangerous part. The flooding that comes ashore with that big rush of water with the storm surge, and also, as we've seen, the flooding from the heavy rains, the inland flooding, showing that a hurricane is not always a coastal event. It can even affect areas hundreds of miles inland. So that's the latest here on Hurricane Milton. We'll have updates all day, all night, and through the next couple of days here on air, online, on our 13 News Now Plus app, on all of our social media. So as a reminder, just stay tuned here. We'll keep you updated throughout the next several days as this storm approaches the Florida coastline and comes ashore. For now, I'm 13 News Now meteorologist Evan Stewart. That's the latest on Hurricane Milton.